What's up, gangsters? It is time for another how-to video, and this is one that's been a long time coming, like a year in the making. Now, for those of you who have tuned into my channel before, this is going to be a little bit different because it's not going to be a model-making how-to video. For those of you who have found this video because you Googled something about UPS, let me explain. I'm a model maker. I make tiny, cool things like this, and this, and these. Now sometimes I'm fortunate enough that somebody wants to pay me to build something for them. And whenever I do that, I have to ship the thing to its new home. And about a year ago, I shipped a completed piece to a client in California, and UPS did their damnedest to destroy the damn thing. They didn't completely vaporize it, but they made a pretty good effort to do that. And so I filed a claim on the insurance policy that I had purchased when I made the shipment. And finally, after months and months and months of fighting with them, I finally got this check right here for $2,147.48 as a settlement for the insurance claim. And along the way, I learned a lot of things, namely that it's pretty hard to get any money out of UPS when they break your stuff, and that not a lot of people know how to do that. I did find somebody on the internet who claimed that with their business, they had to sue UPS like a dozen times every year, and that they always won, and that they would be more than happy to teach you and me how to do that. But of course, they wanted money in order to deliver that knowledge. I promise I don't. I'm just doing this video kind of as a public service thing for people who find themselves in a similar situation, because, hey, you might not be shipping a fragile piece of artwork to somebody, but lots of people ship lots of things, and UPS breaks lots of stuff, and you need to know how not to get beat down by their basic strategy of trying to never have to pay for that. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to be editing this video over a series of days, and it may take me a while, but who knows? Who cares? Anyway, here are some pictures of the model airplane that I was trying to ship to my client. As you can see, it's got lots of fragile little bits and pieces sticking out all over it. So it needs packaging that is not only going to protect it from impact, but also isolate it from vibrations. Now, there are several different ways that you can do that, and this is not really the place to debate which one of those methods is the best. But what I chose was to use this large plastic storage container from Walmart. Being able to get it from Walmart in my small town was one of the reasons that I chose it. But the other reason is that one of my best friends owns a motorcycle dealership, and he ships engines using this exact box. And a Harley engine weighs like 80 pounds, so I figured that my 8-ounce model airplane should be just fine as long as I, like I said, properly isolated it. And here's what I did to accomplish that. As you can see, I built a soft foam rubber structure inside the crate to suspend the model and, at least in theory, protect it from any kind of impacts or vibrations. So that's how I packaged it. The key point here is that it is not a cardboard box, obviously. But again, that's going to be a key point that will come up here in a few minutes. The second thing you need to know is that I shipped this thing through the UPS store. Now, why that's important is because whenever you do that, and you have to keep in mind that the UPS store is a completely separate entity from UPS. One does not own the other. They are completely separate businesses. And when you ship something through the UPS store, they become what's called the shipper of record. And the reason that that's important is because if you have any kind of a dispute with UPS themselves, all of your correspondence has to go through the UPS store. That's just a requirement. So now, in addition to running their daily operations, they have to try and pay attention to you and whatever's going on between you and UPS. And that's just going to complicate things and make it take a whole lot longer. So just be aware of that. I'm not saying don't use the UPS store, because for the most part they're fine. Although, in my case, the manager of the UPS store in my town was about as useful as a rubber crutch. The guy lied to me on a number of occasions about what was taking place. He never sent me the emails that he said he was going to. He basically just didn't do anything he said he was going to do. Fortunately, he had an employee who was really on her game, and she was awesome, and she helped me out a lot. So, at any rate, that's just something to be aware of whenever you are going to ship something. If it's extra special and you're worried that you may end up having any kind of an issue, you may be better off to just work directly through the UPS hub itself if you've got one in your town. Okay, so what happened? Well, I shipped the box and purchased a $2,000 insurance policy on it. I picked that number based on what the original project was billed at, and what I thought was fair if it was a total loss. But, of course, like everybody, I didn't expect to ever actually have to use that insurance policy. When I shipped the box, they charged me $111.06. Here's a copy of the receipt, and some portion of that was for the insurance policy. What did not happen was, at any time did they, and when I say they, I mean the folks at the UPS store, at no time did they say that the fulfillment of that insurance policy, should such a thing become necessary, was going to be dependent on the way that I had packaged my shipment. In fact, they never said anything about the box, the way I had done it, none of it at all. They simply took my money and my package and sent it to California. And UPS done broked the shit out of it. And here you can see the pictures of what happened. And you can see from the marks on the box, these are called stress marks, and what they indicate is where the plastic box has been misshapen, bent, smashed, whatever, to such a degree that it leaves these stress marks in the plastic. And this is a pretty rigid box, so that takes a substantial amount of force to do that. They ripped the wing completely off of the thing and broke about a half a dozen smaller parts off of it. And this was potentially a complete loss. As it turned out, I was able to fix the thing. I spent quite a bit of time doing it, and then hired a specialty art transport company to send it back to my client a second time. And that cost me almost $500 to have it put in a truck and shipped that way. So that's the summary of what happened, what they did, and sort of what it cost. Now, let's get to the part about me actually trying to collect on the insurance claim, which of course I filed immediately. And which they, of course, denied immediately, because that apparently is their standard strategy, is to just deny it out of hand. And so what I got was, and this took a lot of phone calls to the UPS store, because, again, UPS can't communicate with me directly since I'm not the shipper of record. But eventually I got a copy of this fax that basically said, claim status, dispute not approved. And this was in September, towards the end of September, that I finally got this. I shipped the box around the 1st of July. So that tells you how long it took just to get told that they weren't going to honor my insurance claim. So, of course, I then immediately appealed, because they allow you to do that. And what happens when you appeal a shipment through UPS is they have a company, it's a third-party mediator. I'm not sure exactly what their ties are with UPS, but they call them a third-party mediator, and it's a company called Crawford. And I appealed the denial, and again, lots of phone calls, lots of waiting, on and on and on. And finally, what they told me is the following. Again, this is an official communication from UPS, but it came through this Crawford company. The contents contained in the package described above were damaged. We regret any inconvenience. They've been returned to you. And I'm skipping a little bit. When damage occurs, UPS inspects the package, evaluates the packaging. According to our packaging guidelines, which include the International Safe Transit Association, ISTA 3A test procedures for small parcel delivery shipments, published by the ISTA. Your packaging did not meet these guidelines. Now, I'm emphasizing this because this is going to be important as I prepared my defense. Anyhow, UPS is not liable or responsible for loss, damage, any package from improper packaging. The evaluation revealed the following deficiencies in the packaging that was for this shipment. The package was not sufficiently closed and sealed. Okay, the lid was zip tied on the box with a half dozen zip ties. Recommendation: seal the flaps of your shipping container using 6 strips of pressure-sensitive poly tape. Use a strong tape with a minimum width of 2 inches. For regular slotted containers where the flaps meet in the center, apply 3 strips of tape to both the top and bottom of the box so the middle and 2 edge seams are sealed. To avoid this problem in the future, we would be pleased to offer blah 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 additional suggestions. Okay, yes, hello UPS. In case you hadn't noticed, my box was not a cardboard box. It did not have flaps for me to tape shut. So, problem number 1 or whatever. At any rate, their entire basis for denying my claim was that I didn't meet their packaging requirements. So, I decided, all right, fine, here's the deal. I'm not going to accept that. I'm giving you guys one chance basically to make good on this. And I offered to settle the thing for like $1,500. And they basically ignored me, didn't even respond. So I said, okay, fine. I am going to file a suit in small claims court. And that's where the next part of this video goes, is the process of doing all of that and what the results were. Okay, so first things first. When you decide you want to sue someone in small claims court, the damages you're seeking have to be less than $10,000. So I was definitely in that territory. The next thing you have to do is figure out where to serve the suit against the plaintiff. Now, I'm not a lawyer. I don't claim any special legal knowledge, and anything that I say going forward may or may not apply in your state. I live in New Mexico. This is what I had to do here. I live in a small town that's basically, a billion miles from anywhere. And there's a UPS shipping office here and a UPS store, obviously. But that's not where you file a lawsuit against UPS. You have to seek, with any company, this applies to. If you're suing a company that's national or international or whatever, because your lawsuit has to happen within or where the event took place. In other words, within your jurisdiction or within your area where you live or whatever. But the headquarters of the company that you're suing is in some other place, in some other state. You have to find their registered agent. And every company that does business across state lines has a registered agent. And the way that you can find that is to call the office of the Secretary of State in your state, because they have to have that information on file at all times. And as it turns out, the registered agent for UPS is a company in Delaware. And I'm going to try and find in all this information that I have the name of that company. Okay, I found it. So UPS has as their registered agent a company called Corporation Service Company. And they have an address in Delaware and a phone number, and you can call them there, but they're going to give you the name and phone number, or the address of whatever the registered agent location is in your state. In my case, it was in Santa Fe, New Mexico, which is about 4 hours from where I live. So I had to find a process server. Go on the internet, find a process server. He was really cool, let me pay via PayPal. He served the papers that I got from the small claims court in my town. Basically, that's just a packet of stuff that they'll give you. You have to put it in an envelope and mail it off yourself. You're responsible for doing that. So once the papers are served, then they have a certain amount of time to respond, which of course UPS did not. This would be the first of many times they just basically blew off the entire process. So once they've failed to respond, then the small claims court set a date. And as it turned out, the first date in the process was purely an orientation thing. That's how it was advertised to me in the letter that they sent me. And this was going to be in basically January. So again, this thing is stretching out over a period of months. Once I got to the orientation, which again, UPS's representative was also supposed to attend, I discovered two things. One, we could actually have gone to mediation that day had UPS shown up. But that was the second thing. They didn't even bother to respond. So, to make this long story much less long, this happened twice more. There was another court date that was set for an actual pretrial hearing. I selected trial by jury, which was going to cost me $75. So my total court costs at this point were like $175. At any rate, UPS blew that one off, didn't even respond. Then the court set another date, a third date, for a trial by jury. I actually decided to just call the UPS representative in Albuquerque, which by this time I had learned, based on her name and address and phone number being on some of the paperwork that we had been exchanging. And I just called her up and I was like, look, this isn't between you and me personally. You're the representative for UPS. Your name and phone number is on all these papers. I just want to know, are you guys even going to actually respond to this? Because up to that point, they had been completely silent, hadn't shown up to the court dates, hadn't done anything more than return any of the paperwork. They were supposed to do a discovery thing. Basically what happens when you have one of these cases is you collect up all your evidence and your list of witnesses, and you're supposed to allow the other side to see all of that stuff. And so you have a deadline that you have to meet for sharing your discovery, of which I had plenty. I have several file folders here full of evidence that I had collected, and I'll summarize that here in a second. At any rate, they never responded to any of that stuff. And when I talked to this lady, she was nice, but when I said, look, are you guys even going to respond? Are you going to show up to the trial on April the 10th or whatever it was? And she just kind of laughed and said, yeah, we'll get back to you. They didn't. So I told the court that I no longer felt the need for a trial by jury because I was like, why should I bother with going through the jury selection process, spending my own time and energy, wasting a bunch of everybody else's time and energy when UPS probably not even going to show up. So we blew that off. I got my $75 back, and they in fact did not show up to the trial date. So what happens, and I found out that because people kept asking me, are they not required to show up? Are they not in contempt of court? And the answer, unfortunately, is no, they're not. Because with small claims, nobody's actually been subpoenaed. So there is no legal requirement, unfortunately, for them to have to show up to the court date. So that still means, however, that they lost by default. I was awarded the entire amount of the judgment plus court costs, which of course made me happy. But I felt like I probably didn't stand a chance of collecting the money because if they had failed to acknowledge any of this up to that point, what reason did I have to believe that they were actually going to pay? So we'll get to that here in a second. I mean, obviously, you know that they did pay because I showed you the check up front. And I'll tell you how that happened here in a minute. But first, let me just give you the quick summary of why all of this stuff is total bullshit. And I feel like UPS is basically running a scam on people to buy insurance for their shipments that they probably never intend to have to pay. Okay, so unless you are a fellow model maker, chances are you're not going to need to ship something with UPS in as strange a box as I did. But nonetheless, even if you're just shipping normal stuff in a normal box, I think that it's good to kind of know some of the stuff that I learned as I went through this process. Because if you ever do find yourself in a dispute with UPS, this will give you more solid ground to stand on and may in fact help you avoid getting into a dispute in the first place. So, as I said before, UPS basically said this. This was their response to the court when they received the summons. They basically said UPS admits the plaintiff's package was damaged in transit. The plaintiff is not entitled to the amount claimed due to the following reasons. In accordance with federal law, UPS contracted with the plaintiff for the shipment of the package, and I think I mistakenly called them the plaintiff before. Like I said, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know how this stuff works. I guess I'm the plaintiff because I'm complaining. They're the defendant because they're defending. Anyway, it says, UPS contract with the plaintiff for the shipment of the package is governed by the UPS tariff and terms and conditions of service. A copy of UPS tariff is available at ups.com, blah, blah, blah. Under Section 8 of the UPS tariff and terms, blah, blah, blah. Then it goes on to repeat what I said what I had read before. Shipments must all be so packed or wrapped as to meet UPS published standards related heretofore set forth in the service guide or on the ups.com website, and as to pass tests set forth in the International Safe Transit Association, ISTA Procedure 3A, Procedure for Testing Packaged Goods, published by the ISTA. Acceptance of blah, blah, blah. Okay, so there's basically 3 ways that you can figure out what all this stuff means and what the standards are that they talk about so that you can correctly package your shipment, so to speak. Let's first take a look at this ISTA thing. If you Google ISTA testing procedure 3A, this is what you get. A web page for the ISTA that basically says if you want to know exactly what all this means, you have to pay to join. That's it. That's all it really tells you as far as any specifics go. So that's not really going to help you out a whole lot. Then, if you are brave enough to print all, let's see, I don't know, this is like 100 pages, I think, of the UPS terms and tariffs bulletin off of their website. And you go to Section 8. I mean, this thing is dense, all right? It has many, many pages, lots and lots of words. You'll find some things in here about special packaging needs. Didn't help me at all in my case because none of the special packaging addressed how to ship a model airplane. Imagine that. Not a real common thing. So that didn't help me out a whole lot. But what you will find are some references to a couple of things should you be using cardboard boxes that might be helpful. Okay, there's two things: the burst strength test and the edge crush test. Okay, what you have to have at a minimum is a 200-pound burst test strength box. Okay, if your box has a stamp on it like that, then you're all good. But just to basically summarize it, what that means is the burst strength test basically is just a test of how much weight you can stack on top of the thing before it explodes and crushes whatever's inside of it. Same thing with the 32-pound edge crush test. That's this second stamp that you see down there. And that basically is just a measure of how strong the sidewalls of the box are. And pretty much any standard cardboard box should meet those requirements. So chances are, if you're using one of those, you're going to be okay. Now, the other way that you can try to find out how to package your stuff is by going to the UPS Packaging Advisor on their website. Again, isn't really going to tell you a whole lot other than use 6 pieces of tape, have a 200-pound edge crush test box, have a 32-pound ECT box, 200-pound burst strength box, whatever. Okay, if you're doing something that's beyond that, you are probably not going to get a whole lot of specific help. If you keep digging, you'll learn things on the internet, like what's the difference between the edge crush test and the burst strength test. You will see pictures of the machine that they use to do the testing. But here's what really mattered in my specific case. Again, I used this polypropylene plastic container. And so none of the stuff that they say, even vaguely, applies to the package that I sent. So how was I planning to prove or show that my box was at least sufficient to the requirements? How was I going to basically defend myself against all this jargon? Well, I have an engineering background. I'm used to testing and standards and all that sort of thing and doing research. So, in a nutshell, what it all boiled down to is that while there was not any directly comparable test that existed for my plastic crate, there was enough information out there on things like corrugated polypropylene that allowed me to basically conclude that my box was at least 5 times stronger than a 200-pound cardboard box. So, I felt pretty good about that, but just in case, I have kind of a funny picture here that I'll show you. I got together with another one of my engineering buddies, and we did a very scientific test. You can see a picture of him standing on a bathroom scale. You can see that the bathroom scale shows he weighs a little bit north of 200 pounds, 240 to be exact. And in this picture, you can see what happens when he stands on the same kind of cardboard or plastic crate that I used to ship my model airplane. Yeah, if he were standing on a cardboard box, the cardboard box would be flattened. The bottom line is that if I had used a cardboard box to package this thing, even if I had done the box within a box strategy that some people recommend for shipping plastic model airplanes, and all other things having been equal, the model would have definitely been destroyed would have been destroyed completely, would have been damaged far worse than it was in the box that I used. So I know that a lot of that is just kind of nerdy engineering detail that you probably are not going to need to know. But the bottom line is, if you want to keep yourself safe and not give UPS any grounds to refuse to honor your insurance claim, then just make sure that you're using a cardboard box that's got that little stamp on one of the flaps, that you use 6 pieces of tape, and that, those are the basics. You're really not going to get anything that's a whole lot more specific than that. And this is a specific strategy by UPS. It works kind of like patents. If you talk to a patent attorney, they will, let's say that you want to get a patent on your widget, and your widget that you've invented is 10 inches long. A patent attorney is going to tell you not to define your patent so closely that it says that you are patenting a widget that is exactly 10 inches long. Because what happens is, if somebody wants to defeat your patent, they can just make a device that's exactly like yours, but it's 10.5 inches long. They're all good. Same thing happens with UPS. They'll tell you all this stuff in their disclaimers about how you have to meet this standard or the other standard or whatever's on Section 8 of their giant services contract. But they're not going to tell you specifically, because if they do, then they don't have the wiggle room to try and basically tell you that you screwed up, it's your fault, and they don't have to pay. So it's just a game, basically, is what it is. It's a game that this company, which does 70-some billion in revenue pretty much every year, they did last year anyway, and which makes something like $5 billion in profit every year, which has a CEO who gets paid $14 million a year. This is basically just all part of the game that they're going to play to try and keep from paying your dinky little insurance claim should they fail to ship your package safely. Okay, so I think that pretty well covers it. But the last thing that I need to tell you is, how did I actually get paid? Because I was pretty convinced the further this thing went along that even if I won the case through having a good defense, or if they just defaulted and didn't show up, that I wasn't ever going to get paid. I mean, they'd basically blown me off on every single correspondence, every single summons. They did not do anything to make me feel like they gave a shit at all about me, my shipment, my insurance claim, none of it. So honestly, by the time I got to the final court date, I really didn't have a lot of confidence that I would ever collect on the insurance money. But as it turns out, what happens is, after the judgment is rendered in your favor, assuming that it is, then the court will write what's called a writ of execution. And this basically is what says to the defendant, you lost, pay up. And with small claims court, my understanding is that there's basically 3 ways that you can collect. One is to put a lien on some piece of property that they have. The other is to do wage garnishment. If assuming that it's an individual that has like a regular job. That obviously didn't apply in my case because I'm dealing with a corporation. And then there's the just yank it directly out of their bank account method, but that only works if they have a bank account specifically that you have an account number for. So again, given those 3 methods, I didn't really feel like that I stood much of a chance. But what happens when they issue the writ of execution is somebody has to serve that, and it, at least in my state, is the local sheriff, the county sheriff, in the jurisdiction where the registered agent is located, which in this case turned out to be Albuquerque, New Mexico. So what I had to do was get all of these papers from the court, include a money order for $40, and send it all to the Bernalillo County Sheriff. They were going to then take it to UPS and basically say, look, you need to go dig in your petty cash drawer and come up with $2,147.48. Well, I was assured that they could not refuse to do that. As it turns out, I never found out, because I think what happened, About a week after the judgment was rendered and the writ of execution was done, I got a check. That check that I showed you just showed up in the mail. And I was like, okay, sweet. I guess that means that the sheriff went and collected it. But then I got a letter from the sheriff that told me that in addition to the $40 service fee, that I was going to have to pay 2% of whatever got collected to the sheriff's department. And I was like, okay, well, that's a surprise. I didn't know that before. So I called them and I was like, hey, what's up? And they were kind of clueless. And basically, from that conversation, I got the idea that they never actually had to serve the writ of execution because they said, you're good. You don't need to take any further action. So what I think happened is that when UPS was notified of the judgment, they basically just went ahead and cut the check. And I feel like that this was their strategy from the very beginning, that they knew at some point that I wasn't going to quit because I had submitted all my evidence, etc. I basically had made it clear that I wasn't giving up on this thing. And that at some point they basically just made the decision, look, we'll pay this thing if and when we have to, but not before, and we're not going to spend a single dime in the effort to defend ourselves because then that just, represents a higher cost to them. So I think that's what happened. I don't really care at the end of the day because I was able to collect. It's a little bit frustrating that I did all of the work, all the hours of research and phone calls and emails and all that I did to try and win the case. And then ultimately none of that was really of any use. But the bottom line is, if I hadn't done any of that, if I hadn't stuck with it, it's a guarantee that I wouldn't have ever gotten paid. So I would say that, if there's any single message that I'm trying to, put out there for people who find themselves in a similar situation, and I don't just mean with UPS, I mean with any corporation. These guys are all big. These guys all have armies of lawyers. These guys have all been in and out of court hundreds of times. And they assume that you're going to give up. So if you can just figure out how not to, you stand a pretty good chance of getting at least some satisfaction. So anyway, I know this has been long, a lot of detail, but I really hope it helps. I really hope that the time and effort that I spent can actually end up being of some value to anybody else out there that, like I said, finds themselves in a similar situation. I hope you don't, but if you do, again, I hope this helps. And I appreciate you watching. Take care. Much love.